the link here. And I'll send it to all of you.
I shared that other one you sent us.
You shared the...
You tagged us earlier today.
Yes, that didn't have the link to the actual live stream.
Oh, okay.
I'm just going to send that one out.
Right on.
I'll tag you. So if, hold on, and
I'll tag you.
You're live, everybody. So just FYI. Okay. I can't wait to just nerd out a little bit here because, like, I've got, you know, my peeps and I got my arty peeps and, you know, all good.
Go play.
Michael.
Go play. Sorry.
She's talking to her house guest.
I think I've got everything.
You want to email it to me, Nancy, or that would probably be better.
Okay, I'll email it right now.
Or you can text it to me. It's fine.
Okay.
Either way.
Either way, great. I'll send it to you email right now. And you guys are all riveting.
Oh, I see it.
So I'll send it right here.
Cool.
Who got that? Somebody.
Oh, that was me. Mine. I forgot to turn my audio off on my phone. Sorry.
No.
The auto bring whoever's speaking to the foreground thing makes me paranoid and afraid to speak.
Really?
No, but it's funny.
Okay, I hope you guys have some drinks because we're coming up to Thanksgiving Day holiday, which, you know, we're now, hopefully you're seeing your loved ones, but then on the other hand, I'm seeing some loved ones. So we've got some.
I've just got coffee, if that counts.
Mm-hmm. Oh, please, definitely. Fighting and fighting. This is a very short notice fight we've got going on. And I am Professor Nancy Kidder. As you see, I'm putting on my lighting and everything.
Very fancy.
Fighting and fighting at American University, along with my co-professor, Julie Kedzie, who's right there. And we have a very special thing because Mighty Joel Nolan out of Nashville has written a piece that I'd like for him to talk about Bruised, a film.
That's right.
Coming out within hours, right? They put it up at midnight.
Probably.
And it is called Bruised. It's written, directed, and starring Halle Berry, you know, a Hollywood Golden actress. And it's also, I have it in here, written by Michelle Rosenbarg, I believe, or something like that. But it also stars our professor, no stars. Okay, small part. Small part.
Featuring.
In the role of commentator along with Yves Edwards, right? And Valentina Shevchenko she's another small part too. So
she's got her, I'd say her part's pretty significant, yeah. Valentina.
Right.
Yeah.
I think she plays like the nemesis. As we'll talk about the narratives of boxing cinema. But because I haven't seen it, Julie, you haven't seen it either. Are you Twitch that you're doing?
Yeah, I need to learn how to use that. I forgot I was going to work on installing that today.
Yeah.
I'm a little off my schedule. Yeah, we're doing some of the Invicta fighters are doing Invicta adjacent, because I guess some of them are in the UFC now, doing a live stream watching thing. I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna drink some coffee. It's at like 8 a.m. It's okay if she comes in here. It's like 8 at night. I
love it. So watch for that. But I haven't seen it. So I also want to take the time just to talk about my love of boxing cinema. And I'm very fortunate. I'm gonna introduce my old friends and then Michael, a new friend to the Writing and Fighting panels. We call this the epilogue because it's after office hours. When we usually do this on Fridays, and I am fried, my brain. So if I say anything that resembles a clear thought, I'm very happy. So as I said, Julie, former UFC fighter, current Invicta commentator, and current co-professor of writing and fighting. Thank you for coming here. And she has a house guest that she's, that is not helping right. And you're
yes, I have a loud dog also who is unused to having people besides my family in the house. So she's
You're not
confused.
alone. You're not alone. I've got two down here in my office right now, and they're usually very loud.
Yeah, so I apologize, but also this is our casual show.
Yeah, this is catch. So I'm gonna introduce Brian, who is part of, and Joe, because they are of the now retired Art Fight podcast.
Retired undefeated.
Yes,
That's right. That's right.
you guys were, you were reigning champions. So we can slide in here and be the contender for coolest nerd music.
Pass us the nerd baton.
Yes. And Brian, you are a cinematographer. You are a filmmaker, a musician, and now you're actually, because you are like the number one. I'm going to say it, the number one drone cinematographer. Right? But
According to Joe Nolan.
I see a lot of bad drone photography out there, y'all. Brian makes it look easy.
Yeah. No, and especially if it's a wedding video you have to watch. No, Brian is the number one, and he's now learning to fly. Are we at pilot's license?
Yeah. I've been cut loose. I'm on my own. I've been running around having adventures, and I've figured out how to have even one more completely expensive, unnecessary thing that I've added to my life.
God bless.
Can you fly internationally?
No. I'm fair weather. I'm only allowed to fly under visual conditions, not through the clouds yet or anything like that. And you said I have a plane. No, I have access to rent a plane. So I like when I pull up, I have like my old Toyota, and then it's all these other really, Mercedes and Porsches and everything. I'm just a visitor in a completely different socioeconomic strata.
See, in my head, you're going to be flying me to Greece in your G4. So,
okay,
or G5 or whatever number they're at now with the
So
Gs.
here's the thing. This sounds great. I just need a little time. Let's see how your royalties do from this movie. Maybe we can work something out. But that has been honestly, that was the Art Fight podcast was so rewarding, and we did it for about 3 years. When you ask, like, have you guys seen each other? It's like, well, we probably saw each other and talked to each other more than family for about 3 years. So
all during the pandemic, for sure.
Yeah, so it's kind of like we will reconnect when it's time. We're still in that weird kind of fuzzy period, but that was the best 3 years, and we talked to so many great people, and it's been really cool to be assimilated to your community. And then also, Joe, like I saw you did another piece with Wayne White, and like these sort of things where we connected with these amazing artists and amazing people, and then those relationships can continue to build above and beyond what we did for a long time. So, but it's always great to be here, Nancy, and thanks for doing this, and Julie. So excited to be here. And Joe, I can't wait to ask you finally, like I get to ask you questions, right? I've got so many questions.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That sounds good. But I got this, this came to my email like a couple weeks ago. So I write a lot about visual art, and I also write a lot about film, and therefore I get lots of emails from lots of distributors and PR people, saying, check out this movie, look at the new trailer, look at the new photos or whatever. So when the opportunity to get the screener came, I sent it to my editor at the Nashville Scene, and he was into it and wanted me to do it. So I got to see the film already, and I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to talk to Nancy, because Nancy's asked me to do 4 or 5 of these since the last one I did. And I thought this is the time when I could probably tell Nancy, let's do it now. I've got something to talk about. I've got the time right before the holidays, so I'm glad to be here with y'all.
Joe, I'm not. I was never going to let you off the hook. So I'm glad.
Well, I thought it was time I put myself back on the hook for you.
Oh,
Come chase after me for it.
I'm so happy. And you all, I love it. You call yourself like a multimedia artist, as well as outside of doing reviews and stuff. Can you share just what else you contribute to the world, Joe?
What now? I didn't understand the question. What?
What else do you call yourself a multimedia artist, I believe?
I think I say intermedia.
mm.
So like sort of between media, but no, I do a bunch of stuff. I do visual art, I do music. I've been doing a bunch of NFT stuff lately. So a bunch of different stuff. And I see the writing for me is like something that actually, I mean, I've always written stuff, but the more like critical writing for me sort of developed out of all this other stuff. In about the early 2000s, I started blogging, and like really pretty much immediately as soon as I started blogging, I'm like, oh, I want to write a blog about this book I'm reading, and I want to do a blog about this new movie I just saw, and I want to do a blog about this new record I just listened to. And then I suddenly realized I was writing like hundreds and hundreds of words about these things, and I'm like, this is totally unsustainable. Like immediately I was like, I can't really do this because I've got too much that I want to say. And I realized how much fun I was having. And I had gotten I'd done a lot of like creative writing and stuff in college, and I'd done an internship with a newspaper. So I immediately was like, the only smart thing for me to do is to continue blogging in some more realistic way. But I really think that I would get a lot out of and be able to turn this kind of writing into like an actual income if I started pitching this stuff to editors and things. So that's started doing that was like about 2005, I think, is when I first started, freelance writing essentially. And it was really just because I realized that, I realized how much fun I was having at it, but it was also just sort of a thing of, like a lot of, like, I would say this is true of most artists that I know, not all of them, but most artists that I know, they want to also watch all the movies, read all the books, go to all the gallery openings, listen to all the podcasts, et cetera, because all of that input is just going to help them come up with new ideas of their own, right? But in the middle of that process, you're going to sort of pick and choose the things that you find to be most interesting, and you're going to sort of analyze why is that movie so good? Well, because I can't forget about that one scene. Well, why does that one scene work so well? Like, what's happening there? And then you start to figure it out, and then you start to think, okay, well, how can I apply that to the things that I'm doing? And for me, the freelance writing stuff just became a new evolution in the whole process, because I basically just took that part of my art life and just said, well, if I publish this, I can actually also get paid for it. And also the act of publishing something, like the act of teaching, I would compare it to. It's totally different to do that kind of work just in your own practice as an artist, but now take that and translate it so that the average reader can understand what you're talking about. And it takes, you have to go to a whole deeper place to actually, what's the word, like, I'm running out of words already. See, this is the problem. This is the work, right? You have to find a way to translate. It's not really what I'm trying to say, but find a way to, put it all down into words that another person can understand. And that takes you into a whole other level of detail with your own sort of analysis and your understanding of how these things work. And it ultimately is very helpful for me in the other projects that I'm doing for myself. So it's I really enjoy doing it. I really love, and also too, another thing about it is the visual art community in Nashville, especially back in say like the 90s when I first moved here, it was, as you might imagine, it was constantly playing second fiddle to the musical community in Nashville, which was already very well established. So it was really a ragtag just bunch of folks, and everybody literally knew everybody, because there was only like 15 people who really cared. So being able to sort of bring more critical writing into the community was something we really needed anyway. So it's been a cool role for me to be able to play in that sense.
Thank you, Joe, so much. And I really appreciate this. I might play that whole section for our students, because process, which Julie and I really want to have our students understand the process of writing,
Yeah.
product oriented. Although I do want you to talk about the product because we'll talk
Yeah,
about.
sure.
I want to introduce a new friend to Writing and Fighting, Michael Cronenberg of Ringside Magazine. Am I saying that right? Because
Ringside Seat.
Ringside Seat Magazine, which is this amazing graphic design, like oriented, but also great writing that I've fallen in love with, and especially mentioned their new book, Holiday Time, you guys. It's a great thing. I love it. This is film boxing cinema film posters from around the world, going back, to I think what's the earliest one, Michael, that you?
The earliest one is 1921. So it is exactly 100 years of boxing,
And
of boxing movies.
Yeah, is that Buster Keaton?
Yeah, that's
Cool.
the battling butler.
Amazing. And this is the Russian poster, which I love.
Gorgeous.
I know it's gorgeous, but you can also read into, there's probably some anti-capitalism or, going on with this. And I find this so fascinating. And my other favorites, you're going to have to go get the book.
Yeah, it's available. Well, it's available on Amazon in hardcover and paperback.
But the other one that I just find so amazing is the French Bogart. Look at this Bogart, where he's not is he main star? I think he's actually more of a supporting.
No, he's the main star. It was his last film, actually. He died. He already had cancer while he was making it. It was already said.
But they definitely present him as almost like the main event of the fighter, because he's got such prominence, because this was after he was dead, and when it was shown in France, and I think that's just gorgeous. And
it is gorgeous. Do you have the prints? Like, do you actually sell copies of the prints, or is it a collection?
No, I got those. I don't think I'd be allowed to sell them as prints, in book form. I got the images, the high res images, and for the book.
What was the process of that?
Well, I'm a graphic designer. I've been a graphic designer for a long time. I'm graphic designer for the Film Noir Foundation. I freelance for Marvel Comics. So I wanted to do it because I love boxing movies. This goes back to, I was talking to Nancy about this, when we first met. My dad was a boxer. He was a pro boxer for a period of time. So I've loved boxing since I was a kid. So it's kind of in the blood. So I eventually got into boxing. Also, it became an art form because I started doing lithographs, boxing lithographs. So they're in the permanent collection, Georgetown University, the International Monetary Fund, a lot of private collections and galleries. So that was my first step in with art and boxing. And then 5 years ago, starting Ringside Seat with Nigel Collins and Eddie Muller, my good friend Eddie Muller, decided to kind of branch off what the Film Noir Foundation did, which is the Film Noir Foundation does a magazine that I designed called Noir City. And I wanted to do something similar, at first a digital magazine, because the costs were not going to be, no printing costs or anything like that. So, and get it started also with former writers who had written for The Ring magazine. And, the whole idea of the magazine was, and it was just following in Eddie's footsteps, which was, the idea is great writing. We want great writing. It's important to have quality and great writing. Because I knew I could I knew I could do the graphic design. I knew I could make the magazine look good. But we got to find quality writers, and luckily I was able to get Bill Detloff, who was a former senior writer with The Ring, who's the editor-in-chief of the magazine, and he's the guy who's kind of been he's a terrific writer. He wrote a fantastic biography of Ezra Charles, and he's currently writing a biography of Matthew Saad Muhammad. So he's kind of like the linchpin for me finding the great writers and finding the really good writers. And we've really found, you know, internationally, actually, some excellent writers. And I think that our audience recognizes that. They recognize the two things. They see the quality of the writing and the quality of the graphics, you know, and 5 years, I think we've grown enough that we're now we now do a print magazine, we do a print edition, and we're publishing books, and we do an annual book actually every year. And the idea behind that was same thing as the Film Noir Foundation did, which was digital magazine, and to collect the best stories, the best writing from that year. And we publish an actual annual, which I actually sent. Nancy, you'll be getting your copy. So we published 3 of these. So we do it for each year, and it's the best writing, and I designed the book. And so that's also available on Amazon. So that's basically where we came from. And the whole idea of the movie thing was pretty much me and my love of films and my love of boxing movies. My favorite boxing movie is The Setup. My connection with Eddie also has helped, you know, and he's, you know, Eddie Muller's dad was Eddie Muller Sr., who was one of the great boxing writers for the San Francisco Examiner, who's in the Hall of Fame. And Eddie has a lifelong, you know, love of boxing. I don't know if any of you watch Noir Alley, but he's shown The Setup. He's shown other, you know, he's shown The Harder They Fall, I'm pretty sure. So we always bonded. We kind of bonded through our love of boxing.
I thank you so much, Michael. And all this crew right here, we are so thankful that we're bringing long form writing back, because we've had some hits. And I think we talked about, you know, Sports Illustrated.
Yeah, that and just to emphasize that is what Ringside Seat is all about. It's long form writing. I wanted to be there for what Sports Illustrated used to be. Sports Illustrated, you know, used to be the king of long form boxing writing, and great writing too. I mean, some of the great writers, Mark Cram and Pat Putnam, also some fantastic writers, and you know they don't even cover boxing anymore. You know, and they just hardly have a magazine anymore. It's not a weekly, of course, anymore. But I wanted to kind of like get long form, that long form, great long form writing. That was going to be really, really important. I think Bill Detloff and I are in total agreement about that. You know, and you know, so that's hopefully we have. I don't know if we're replacing Sports Illustrated, but we're there where Sports Illustrated has kind of disappeared.
Well,
to me, because I wonder how much of that demise of that kind of great boxing writing had to do with sort of the, you know, I don't know how you'll feel about this, but like, you know, the feeling of like boxing sort of going through a doldrums period for a while. But now, I mean, it's like, I can barely remember when people weren't interested in boxing because boxing's on fire now.
Yeah, you know, it's like, you know, the demise and the death of boxing has been going on for 100 years now. Everybody's saying boxing's going to die. I mean, you know,
right.
Whatever it may be, unpopularity, you know, like maybe champions, you know, there's no, you know, magnetic, you know, personalities in the fight game, or a death in the fight game, which is like, oh, that's the end. We've got to outlaw boxing, you know?
Right.
So that's been going on forever.
Right.
But I think, you know, I mean, definitely, I mean, I hate to admit it, as much as I love boxing, it's like, I wouldn't call it a niche sport, but, you know, it's definitely taken a back seat. And then Nancy and I were talking about this the last time we were talking. It was that, you know, there was a time where like the heavyweight champion of the world, everyone knew the heavyweight champion of the world. And he was the king of the world. He was the baddest man on the planet, you know, and it's been a while since that's been the case. It's probably been a while since Mike Tyson, probably.
Right.
Bless you.
I think that, you know,
Good
recently
save.
there's been some really good fights recently. I think boxing, we could go on and on about this, like the problems of boxing, you know, the alphabet sanctioning bodies, which
Right.
keep diluting championships. The fact that pay-per-view has made it difficult on people. You know, there was a time I grew up, you could see Muhammad Ali. I mean, not every Muhammad Ali fight was on, and not maybe his biggest fights, but some of his big fights were on national television, were on ABC.
Yeah.
Sugar Ray Leonard, also Larry Holmes, you know, George Foreman. These were guys I grew up with, you know, and there was a golden age of boxing, the golden age of heavyweights, and then, you know, the Four Kings, you know, in the 80s.
Yeah. Amazing.
So I think, you know, boxing has done this to itself in a lot of ways. But you know, there's still a lot there, and there's still a lot to watch. There's plenty out there to see, and there's been some recent good fights to enjoy.
For sure.
So this is so cool. I'm loving all these threads, and I thought maybe, because I know we have a little bit of a time constraint. I'm staying whenever, because I'm really gonna get my teeth into this content right now. I thought a good way to maybe start this is overall. Let's just talk about boxing and cinema, because there are definitely more movies about boxing than any other sport. And as Julie and I, we kind of inform our class, cinema is embedded in boxing, in that the first feature film was Fitzsimmons versus Corbett, and
interesting.
I believe it was 1897. And I won't go into it, but basically the promoter of the film, who was like, you know, someone who's working out with a new kinescope, or I forget what those are called.
Booty shots.
Oh,
sorry, Nancy.
Yeah. Yes, that's part of it. Definitely, Julie. But he was also got together with a fight promoter, and so built this feature film as you build a fight, and all of the great, you know, talk about it and buzz got people to want to go see this fight. It was an upset, had everything going on. Yes, they think that women wanted to go to the movie because guys were wearing their very short shorts and, you know, and no shirt. Who knows? We've read some articles on gender. So, but to go into more, what I love about the boxing film is that boxing in general, we think of it, it's always about more than the fight.
Mm.
You know, we talked about Jack Johnson, Julie, in class, and that fight was way more meaningful about race and Jim Crow and what was going on in that era. So all fights, we bring something extra. Even Floyd Mayweather versus Pacquiao, it might have been capitalism was the main thing, because it was all huge money, even though the fight kind of disappointed and in itself. But there's always something. So what I love about film is that it's also playing on this, that it's something more, whether it's the everyman who finally gets a chance and shows that he can, you know, go against adversity, which we have Bruised. It looks like there's a comeback or a second chance. Love, all these things get explored. And I think that that's what's so amazing. I also think because it's a sports movie without helmets, it's one-on-one, the tension of a fight is just so like that, you know, it's just so incredible. And I know we have fighting in other kinds of movies. We had to make this designation, right, Julie, when we were talking on an earlier thing, that fighting in like an action movie is somewhat different than combat sports, because combat sports, whereas action, like it could be you against evil or you against some, you know, or sometimes in a war movie, you're not doing it because you choose to. Prize fighting, we could say whether that's a choice sometimes, but there's something really special. So that's my whole thing I want to just go into. And I thought maybe we could all recommend a movie for those who want to build their boxing canon. You know, I think we all kind of know about Raging Bull and Rocky, but please bring those up and describe. But a boxing movie that you would recommend people watch to kind of get an insight. And I'm going to go first because I have my hat that I want to wear. Because and I'm going to do two. I can't help it. I'm going to do Prize Fighter and the Lady, which is Myrna Loy and Max Baer, the reigning champion. I think that came out in 1934. I'm pretty sure. Oh, yes, because it was pre-code. And it's a 10-minute dancing sequence with Max Baer, the reigning champion, where he's actually pretty good.
33, actually. Sorry. Sorry to be technical, but I had it up on my computer from the book. I have the whole list of the book. So that movie is in our book. So
yes.
Sorry.
No, I love it. No, and it's pre-code, which is also factors in there. And Myrna Loy, who you guys may know, is Nora and the Nick and Nora franchise that comes out, The Thin Man. That comes out later. And I just think, you know, she's kind of the main star actor-wise. But it also has I think Jack Dempsey's in it and has all these other characters.
Primo Canera is in it.
Yeah.
Oh.
And Primo Canera and Max Baer fight one another, and they actually did fight one another, and Max Baer beat him to win the heavyweight title. Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. I didn't
Nerd out. It's awesome.
I'm sorry.
So was
Love
Max Baer, was he the current champion when he made that film? Or was he?
I don't think. Yes, Baer was. I believe Baer was the champion. I think in 32 is the fight between Baer and Canera, and he destroyed Canera. By the way, he knocked him down, I think, 8 times.
Yeah.
Primo Canera was a giant. He was like 6'8", and he weighed like 270 pounds. But he was a horrible fighter. But he was terrible. In fact, just to divert. The Harder They Fall, the movie The Harder They Fall, and the book The Harder They Fall, that is based on Primo Canera. You know, the fighter in that is actually loosely based on Primo Canera.
Definitely. And that fighter is someone who is this foreign-born. Primo Canera was Argentinian, and basically the mafia, I would say, or just with organized crime, basically set it up that he would win and become champion because he wasn't that great a fighter and had like a glass chin, I guess. So The Harder They Fall, I think that's 1949.
No, 56, I believe. Harder They Fall is
We do a list in the note in the
56.
chat.
It is 1956.
I know. So The Price for the Lady, and then the other one, because I saw this in your book, was Joe Palooka, which I watched 1934, I believe. And why I want to bring it up is that I love Jimmy Durante and he's fabulous.
Is he the fighter?
The fighter. He's the coach. But Joe Palooka was based on a comic that came out, I believe, like in the late 20s, and about a gentle giant, a guy who kind of gets into fighting by like, isn't a bad guy, just kind of, but he's a good fighter. And Lupe Velez is the female, and that's why another hat, because she is fabulous. She was a Mexican actress. I looked her up after watching it, and she's got like one of those great Hollywood scandal-ridden, you know, dated every guy from.
She's married to Johnny Weissmuller.
Yeah, there you
Oh,
go.
wow.
Yes. Thank you. I mean, so those are my, Joe Palooka would go on and be another film and a TV series in the 50s. And I think a Palooka, people say, and I didn't know this was the origin, is kind of someone who what kind of fighter is it, Michael? When you say someone's a Palooka?
I don't know. We did last issue of Ringside Seat. We did a story all about Joe Palooka.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that much about him until our writer Don Stradley wrote about him, and there's actually a statue. You and I were talking about that, Nancy. There's actually a Joe Palooka statue. he was so popular,
Yeah.
especially during the war. I mean, he goes to war in the comic strip. He actually goes to World War II, and he's fighting in World War II. And he's this heroic figure that transcended boxing and became, you know, a war hero. And then he fights crime. He eventually fought crime in comic books in the 50s, and he actually lasted into the 60s. And there was a Joe Palooka video game in the 80s that came out.
There he is. I think that's so interesting. And I love the word transcend, because yes, this was something that you would read in your daily or your Sunday comic book, and part of his thing. And I also thought it was interesting that he was a guy who was a gentle giant who, you know, because I like that idea of a boxer not just being someone who's stoic and very aggressive. So those are my picks. I know I went, that's how I've been lately. So I'm going to start, and then Michael, can I go to you next? And then Joe, I know you have to get off soon. So then we'll go to you.
Well,
and
you can go to Joe next. I mean, you know, I don't want to take up too much time.
Joe, you need to get off at 8.
Yeah, at 8 your time, 7 miles, 20 minutes. Yeah.
So, and maybe you'll talk about Bruised or another film as well.
Okay. Yeah, I can just sort of do this really fast. So in my article, for anybody who was interested in actually reading it, it'll be published at NashvilleScene.com on Thanksgiving Day. So it comes out, the Nashville Scene comes out every Thursday. It's our alternative weekly. So you can read the whole thing there. But I kind of started off the review talking about the fact that that combat sports movies in general are like inherently dramatic, right? Because the sports, the actual action is just made for cameras. Like who doesn't? I mean, that's why we all watch them any chance we get. And inevitably, and you can talk about the socioeconomic realities around combat sports usually are the reason for this. But there's almost always a dramatic story about an underdog, because everybody's an underdog in combat sports for the most part, you know? And so it's just, there'll always be movies about it. And I mentioned Rocky, and I mentioned Raging Bull as like classics of all time. And I also mentioned the ongoing Karate Kid / Cobra Kai franchise as like, people get enough of that. It's not just because of Daniel LaRusso and the Cobra Kai gang. It's because of the inherent nature of those sports and why they'll always be interesting and dramatic. And it just helps to have a familiar brand to tag it all onto. But Bruised, I would say, I thought you could read my review on Thursday, but generally, although not a perfect movie by any means, I really thought it was quite good. And the thing that blew me away about it the most, Halle Berry's fantastic in it, by the way, and the core cast of the movie, which is like her female trainer, the young
commentator.
Yeah, Julie Kedzie is incredible as the commentator. The little boy who plays her son. There's a thing about a strange kid like coming to live with her. And also I can't remember the actor's name, but the guy who plays like her boxing coach, because it's a movie, so she's got all these different trainers. But the guy who plays her boxing coach is also fantastic. I mean, he's perfectly cast. Like I thought, I got confused at some point, and I thought, no, he's a real boxing coach. And it's like, no, I just recognize him from other movies he's been in. So it was really good in that sense. I mean, and Halle Berry especially is really great in this, you know. And I think it's a challenge for actors when they do direct a film where they're actually the star in it too. But she does great, handling her own scenes in front of the camera. And here's the thing: when you do a lot of writing about movies, you find out that when you see first-time directors, a lot of times they'll get things right. They'll get, the script is seems like perfectly like tightened up before they got started. And you can't, there's not a bad line in the movie, the editing might be particularly great. And all of these things ultimately are decisions the director's making, even though they're collaborating with these other technical wizards, right? But one of the things that most first-time directors kind of blow is the tone of their film, you know, and the tone of your movie can make all the difference in the world. You can have a comedy that's got just the right tone, and you can have a bunch of half-baked jokes that are hilarious just because the vibe of the movie it sets everything up perfectly, you know. Or it can be the opposite. You can have a comedy that's completely not funny because it's all too dark, you know, or it's all too light or whatever, you know. And this movie to me is, for the flaws that it does have, this movie to me, because of the acting, but especially because of the tone, really is special and really does deserve to get her noticed as, like, you know, an accomplished first-time director, because I really am still kind of in awe of it, because I can't believe how bleak and how brutal they go in this movie. Like, you're kind of waiting for it to like turn the corner and like for the horns to start to play and the crowd to start to roar and for the whole thing to turn into like a feel good thing. And man, I swear to God, it really never does it. Ever. It just refuses to. And instead, it just is a very quiet movie about people living in a dark place, and this one person who gets a chance to sort of right not so much a wrong in her past, but to sort of get some redemption out of a situation where she was humiliated, essentially. And that's about as good as it gets. And it's really amazing in that way, because most movies would do all the other things that most sports movies in general do, and certainly most combat sports movies do them too, which is, you know, at the end of it, you know, Daniel LaRusso is going to win that tournament. You know what I mean? And thank God he does. It's amazing. Crane kick forever, y'all. But it's this movie, as many, you know, even though there's some cliches and there's some characters that, you know, sort of don't get, you know, sort of just dead end in the script and stuff like that, at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that almost every other movie like this would do that this movie does not do. And it's really—
I have a question for you, Joe.
Reason. Yeah.
So, because I know you're on limited time, this is the thing that I think everybody wants to know. People were mostly concerned, right, about, people always want to talk about the fight scenes, right, and how accurately, or how, you know, whatever, how well they were done or executed or whatever. And I just want to say, just as a side note, I don't really need to talk about my favorite fight film, but I know that Raging Bull is a cliche, but the abstraction that is in those fight scenes is what makes that, for me, the releasing the burden of hyper accuracy and hyper realism, you know, to satisfy these kind of conversations or these sort of measures, right? Like, I love that there's a layer between the actuality and the perception, and it kind of bridges this gap to your imagination in a way as part of the cinematic experience that I think is great. Now, obviously, we're talking about Martin Scorsese here, but in this case, you know, what did you think of how the fight scenes were executed in this film?
I have two things I'd say about that. Number one, I understand what you're saying about Raging Bull, and I think you're right in a way that he kind of realized smartly that this never really works on film. So let's not even try to do this. Let's try to do something more impressionistic and more creative, and let's relieve ourselves, as you say, of the burden of trying to make this hyper realistic thing. I think to some degree, the Rocky films actually do one of the better jobs of it. And as we all know, if you've read about the Rocky films, a lot of those scenes were shot where they're like, just had to break down and say, just really hit me. You know what I mean? And we're just going to film you punching me, so it looks like I'm being punched, right? Which is sort of cheating in the other direction. But this movie, I would say two things about the fight scenes. The first thing I would say is, I don't feel like the action, I feel like the action, like most combat sports movies, is unrealistic, right? So I'd say that first. It's not realistic you don't really get the feeling like you're really watching people beat each other up. That said, some of the stunt work is pretty good. And I would say the better part of it, and the part that I thought was coolest, is the fact that her character, Halle Berry's character, part of like her thing is that she is a grappler, right? So she kind of has this capacity to beat people that are bigger than she is, because she doesn't necessarily have to knock out Valentina Shevchenko in this case, right? And one thing I really liked about it was it's one of the movies, I mean, maybe Red Belt is close. I haven't seen that in a minute, but it's one of the movies where you see like really pretty realistic jujitsu sequences happening, you know? And I thought that was pretty rad. And I actually think Julie helps a lot in those cases, because the commentary, it's almost like the early days of watching the UFC and like the burden, you know, of that Joe Rogan was carrying for the rest of us, of like, let me try to explain why this is good and not boring, you know? And I think that they did a really good job of making grappling sequences realistic and also interesting. And I hope that actually translates to people who don't know. For me, of course, I've seen enough of this stuff that I'm like, whoa, impressive. That's a really cool sweep, you know? And I'm hoping that people who don't know enough about it will get the same impression and maybe actually become more interested in that aspect of the sport as a result. So I think it was a bit of a hit and a miss as far as the fight scenes go. But let me jump now and say, given all these things I've said about Bruised, the movie that I'll recommend, and the movie that it really kind of reminded me of the most, was The Fighter, right? The Mark Wahlberg movie, The Fighter. So his biopic of Ricky Hatton, where it's essentially kind of in a lot of ways the same kind of a story, where it's just about people who are just in a down and out place and living down and out lives. And it's, you know, in the case of,
actually, I'm sorry, it's not Ricky Hatton. It's about Mickey Ward.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mickey Ward. Yeah, I just looked at. I just looked it up because in my brain I was like Mickey Hatton. I was like, no, I'm like Ricky Hatton. I was like, no, it's Mickey Ward. Ricky and Mickey are throwing me off. But yeah, so they're living in Lowell, Massachusetts, right? So, and it's all about like, you know, his whole story is a perfect like Rocky-esque story for you know, for a film, obviously. And Mark Wahlberg, you know, as somebody might know, he spent years and years and years literally training to be this character in this movie before he finally got all the pieces in place to make it. And they did a great job, and it's awesome. But it's another movie, kind of like, I mean, in a way, Raging Bull falls into this category too. If Raging Bull wasn't such an artistic masterpiece, Raging Bull also is a movie that's, you know, just like kind of a really dark film in a lot of ways, dramatically speaking. And so to me, the Fighter was the most recent movie that made me feel that I kept thinking of when I was watching Bruised, because it was just like a lot of this movie has to do with like trauma and the fallout of trauma, the violence, the trauma caused by violence, the violence caused by trauma, and all of the wreckage and everything you're coping with in between. So there's just a lot of just like I said, man, it's a really bleak movie in a lot of ways. I'm still surprised at how bleak it was, but in the best way, really. I really mean it in the most positive way, because I really felt like one of my favorite movies I've seen in recent years is the Star Wars movie Rogue One. And I tell people, I think that's the best Star Wars movie ever made. And they're like, why do you think that? And I'm like, because nobody kisses and everybody dies. So to me, this movie is similar in a way, because it just doesn't do anything that you think it's going to do. It just doesn't. It just sort of goes to a place and just stays there. And I really think it's amazing that it's got that much courage. So I think it's well worth watching, and you should also watch The Fighter, because that's another good bleak boxing film.
You know, Joe, while you're saying this, the movie I was going to bring up as my favorite combat sports movie, which I cannot get streaming anywhere, is Girl Fight with Michelle Rodriguez.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the reasons for that is because of that bleakness and that the idea of the trauma that you carry into the ring with you. And I haven't seen Bruised all the way yet, just the scenes not even the scenes I filmed. I don't even know where I am in it, but I'm glad that I sound smart. But
yeah, you do.
Oh, good. As a good script writer. But that bleakness, I think that I found a lot of in Girl Fight, and I was just kind of wondering about where that stands. And of course, because I hold female fight movies up to, my golden trophy of love. And where you think it stands in kind of that, is it oeuvre? Is that the right way? I don't know. Did I just say egg in French? I don't know.
Where Bruised stands in the girl fighting movies?
Yeah, kind of where that,
man,
yeah.
I think I think it does very well. I think it's been a while. I saw a girl fight, but it's been quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
What else? There's like what's the one?
$1 Million Baby.
$1 Million Baby. Yeah. Karate Kid 3.
There was, and I know we say martial arts movies aren't exactly the same as like boxing movies, but I'd say Wing Chun, that movie with oh Lord, I forgot her name already. Michelle Yeoh. A lot of Michelles who are good writers and actors that I'm bringing up. But yeah,
interesting.
But there's just kind of that darkness.
I don't think there's not a ton of these movies for us to compare it to, but I think it compares well. I think it represents itself well. And I think I mentioned this too in the article, this is something Brian and I talked about on the podcast all the time, that you have, men's martial arts starts off with circus fights, just like crazy, no holds barred kind of matchups that are, almost negligent in some ways, and then slowly but surely over about 2 decades, we get to the point where you've got world-class athletes with interlocking systems of martial arts, disciplines that have now formed into an actual cohesive, sort of overall fighting method. Right. And now everybody still has their emphasis, and everybody, every now and then, the spinning back fist is back, or the low kick is stopping everyone. So you still have this innovation going on, but essentially it's over these last 2 decades, you saw it get built into the thing that we all were wondering, what will this be ultimately? How will this all balance out? And we sort of see what that is at this point. But 2 decades on, then the women start, and they don't have to reinvent the wheel. They get to start doing MMA after we know what MMA actually looks like, So to me, in a lot of ways, the women's side of the sport has this huge head start on the men, because they don't have to wonder, how does MMA work? Now, still trying to figure out, I think, a lot of how does it work for women as athletes versus men as athletes, because there's differences, obviously. And I think one of the things that I like so much about the women's side of the sport is the fact that I've never seen the boring goddamn sports I saw at the beginning of the UFC, when it would just be 2 giant dudes just leaning on each other.
Don't watch my fights.
But I really sort of, God, we almost never see that in the women's fights. We see a lot of the opposite of that, which is just 2 people who won't stop, and maybe should, you know what I mean? So I think it's very interesting to see what the women's side of the sport is doing. And I really think there's a lot of reasons to feel like if you want to see martial arts evolving in real time, you got to watch the women fight, because there's huge innovation happening there. And the guys are now at a point where it's just sort of incremental little things are changing. And all of our fighters from New Zealand who brought all the feinting game and all this stuff into it, that's pretty dominant right now. For a minute, we'll see if Max can get another shot at Volkanovski. but I feel like the women's side of the sport is super important. And I think it's great that there's a new movie being made about that side of the story, and that is as good as it is. It's not just full of cliches, or it's really very much about that other part of the story that you're talking about. There's the drama of fighting and training and all that stuff, but this movie is focused a lot more on how does a person find themselves fighting in a cage? How do you end up there? Well, let's start with her mom, And I think it's a movie that women fighters can feel really good about.
And there's something else I'm wondering about when you're saying it, because I've read some of the reviews. Again, I haven't seen the movie, get to see it tomorrow night, finally. But in that, I have read some reviews saying it's not a new story necessarily,
Mhm.
It's very much, it's a story people are familiar with in a lot of ways, except for the way Halle Berry has completely made it her own story in a lot of ways. Like she's made this her own, like, and not her own story as in personally, but I mean that she's taken this narrative and she's taken it away from how it was originally supposed to be, a white Irish Catholic young girl, and turned it into a middle-aged Black woman, and
Right.
still made it work, and actually probably made it work better, because in a lot of ways that sort of undermines the cliches
Mhm.
and makes it a stronger movie, makes it a stronger character and more relatable. I was just wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's real. I think it's I think, like you say, I mean, I think it probably would have ended up being more that, I wonder if I mean, I don't know what it would have been otherwise. You know what I mean? It's hard to tell having seen this. It's hard to imagine the other version of the story. Wasn't like Blake Lively going to be the fighter or something like that? I mean, it was crazy. It was like some, and I mean, Halle Berry is obviously a beautiful woman, but she's also somebody who's already proven that she can play very realistic characters in very bad situations. You know what I mean? So I take her very seriously as an actress, and she absolutely delivers here. And I think that, they could have told a bleak working class story about some Irish girl, sort of like the Mickey Ward movie, but I don't know that they would have done that with Blake Lively. I think that's who it's supposed to be, but I think with Halle Berry, I mean, she's got the chops and the guts to say, no, let's make this a story that's about poverty. Let's make it a story that's about addiction. Let's make it a story that's about abuse. Let's make it a story that's about anger. That's a huge part of it, is that like part of her whole character is that she's one of these people who sort of is scared until she's angry, and then she's a handful, you know what I mean? And we see fighters like that all the time, you know what I mean? Who they get angry and then they win, and that's not the best plan, but it works, So I think that's it's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine this story done another way that would be as unique.
Hey, I just want to interject real quick to say also, Julie, you should definitely know, if you're not aware of this, that you are a huge pillar and part of the pedagogy that led to this film even being created, much less you being in it and obviously starring. But still, your history and where you fall in this lineage is massively important. And this wave that is culminating in things like this, a star like Halle Berry putting all of her marbles out there to be like, this is what I'm gonna put my name down on this and on the next level. Julie, you were one of those people that brought this to bear. So just want to point that out.
It's really kind of you. Thank you. I think it was not done alone. That's for sure. Like we're all dependent on the person who we fight, and yeah.
No, I think you did it alone. I think you did it completely alone.
Okay, yeah, it was me. I carried the burden of women's MMA.
No, but honestly, I mean, like
somebody had to lose all those fights.
No, but I'm honored to, you're one of those people. So
thank you. Honestly, I love that I got the opportunity to be in this, but I think, and this sounds so silly, but I think the fact that Invicta was so prominently featured, that to me is the most, that just makes me happier than anything, because talk about an organization that mirrors what women have gone through in the sport and gives women a platform. Like that is, I think that's incredible. Like I can't thank Halle Berry enough for making Invicta, a huge part of the movie, because I mean, that's talk about getting knocked down and getting dusted off and getting back up there. That's Invicta.
Absolutely. I was one of those people in the earliest days, paying the $5 for the pay-per-views, and it would kind of come across the internet, but I couldn't wait to see it. And to Joe's point, it was like, as much as everything in the totality of MMA is amazing and really interesting, you could tell that there was something going on here that was going to be the next level, and a next sort of wave embodiment of like a new synthesis of all of this to behold. And the competitive, people that are competing in relative obscurity at the time, to see where they've all come now, and watching early Rose Namajunas
I
and
know that flying armbar, man.
right.
Jeez.
I mean, so just all of those, and just the early days of Holly Holm being really a boxer. I mean, that was just kind of in there, and getting making that turn, so you could see all the different sort of tributaries coming together at that point. And yeah, so Invicta is a huge part of that. And obviously you are.
Well, thank you. But well, I don't really have anything to say about that, because I don't think women have done or gotten enough credit. But that's always going to be my platform, is give us more platforms and we'll deliver. But thank you. I don't think it's me, but I think I was lucky to be involved, for sure. Yeah. But I'll take compliments all the time.
Julie, you are the female MMA just figurehead that we are carrying through. So, thank you. And I thank you for bringing it up. Joe, it's after 8. So I just wanted to.
I got to roll. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. I wanted to tell you that Stanley McKinley Henderson is the coach, the actor who plays the coach.
Oh, he's so
Yeah.
And I also love him because he's a great actor. He is a professor as well, Julie. I don't know if you know this.
I did not know that.
Interesting.
Yes, at University of Buffalo, where he teaches theater, in his between, making Dune, I think was another film he was in.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yes.
But we'll bring him into the fold of the writing and fighting.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he's great. He's fantastic. And he's a bit of a sort of like a, I mean, this is a kind of a see, it's hard because like these cliches that we talk about in these genre movies, they're also the tropes that make them the genre. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's the hard part, I think, is somehow having all those characters in play, but somehow making them uniquely those characters, but you sort of got to have the paternalistic coach there. You know what I mean? Rocky's got to have a Mickey, you know what I mean? And so I feel like he's great in it. And like and just his whole demeanor, it's like, I mean, honestly, I was now that you say he's in Dune, I'm like, of course he's in Dune. He's in a lot of makeup, but he's obviously in Dune. And I'm like, that must be where I thought I saw him recently. But I swear to God, I was like, I think I saw him like backstage with some fighters, like doing some mitts earlier. He does it. He's so perfectly cast, but it's really great. So you guys check out the article on Thursday if you can. Everybody have a great Thanksgiving, and it's great to be back, Nancy.
Thank you, Joe. And yes, I'm going to keep bringing you back.
Okay.
And I'm going to put the link in the YouTube in the
Okay,
comments.
cool.
So thank you. And I also love the fighter. It's part of our syllabus.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah. And then it's interesting, Rocky, I don't mean to send you out on this, but I guess there's a new director's cut of Rocky 4.
Bring it on.
I know. Well, yeah. But,
Thanks, guys. Good to see you. Nice to
Bye.
meet you, Michael. Great to find
Nice
out
to
about
meet
your
you.
magazine. Good
Yeah,
to see
thank
you guys.
you.
Bye, Julie. Have a good holiday, everybody.
all right. And Julie, I don't know is there anything else you want to bring up about Bruised being on the set? I didn't know it was originally written for a white Irish person. I had
Yeah, very like a 25-year-old. Yeah, that's what I read about it a little bit, and then I read some of the reviews and stuff. I mean, I didn't read anything about. I didn't see the script except for like my page. I was there like a day, and then I did ADR later. So, but I would say to bring up about this, and I think I've mentioned this before a couple of times when asked about Bruised, is that like what blew me away. Halle Berry is an incredible human being, first of all. And the people around her, everybody was just so kind and so cool. But what was cool was when she came to an Invicta, and I heard that she was going to be there, and I thought she'd be in the audience or cage side or something. This was pre-COVID. And I had done all my research, and I'd done the fighter interviews, everything. I was cage side prepping for the show, and I see this young woman in the cage, and I'm like, I don't know who the hell that is. Oh my God, in braids, like sweats, like looking like a fighter out there. And like, I've interviewed I don't understand, who is this person in the cage right there? And like, TJ was like, no, that's Halle Berry. And I was like, holy crap, totally mistook her for a very young fighter, like not making that up at all. So I think it's kind of a testament to how well she can deliver. If she fooled me at a show where it was supposed to be calling fights, like pretty amazing. That, I mean, so impressive, and such a warm and kind human being too.
It's great to hear. And it's interesting because we talked about women in combat sports films in our last, or a couple episodes. I don't know what we call them, classes, panels that we had. And it is interesting to see that, you know, women in combat sports still being like the main role, not just being, because I just talked about women, we were, you know, the love interest, or, you know, Myrna Loy wears an apron in half of this movie while if she's not wearing like a so she's not in the ring as a fighter. But I do think it's interesting to see that, obviously, you know, directed, you know, that whole term, the male gaze, that, you know, I think it's interesting to see that women, you know, we can get beaten up their face, which is usually the value appearance. And to see Halle Berry, who I think is one of the most beautiful actresses, you know, to have her take damage. I mean, it's in the preview where she like headbutts the guy, right? And there's blood. So I just, for me, I love just seeing those images and knowing that that's out there now. And, you know, because we really can only name a handful of female oriented combat sports movies that are where the female is not the boxer or fighter. Not to say those side characters aren't important, because that's the other thing. And I want to go to Michael here. You know, that what happens around the ring in boxing films is just as important.
Yeah, you know, I wanted to say that, you know, Joe was talking about the fighter. You really can't leave out Mickey Ward's brother, which is played by Christian Bale. I think
Amazing.
He's more important than anything else in that movie. I think the movie was made because of him. I think Mickey Ward's career was dedicated to him, and, you know, brilliantly played by Christian Bale. So for me, it's the reason to watch the movie is Bale and the story of Mickey Ward's brother.
I completely agree. We have our students just watch a few scenes and just look at his mannerisms, and how much you get of the character just watching him. And Lowell, where we kind of look at kind of location as a character, that city. Yeah,
and one of our writers, he's not writing for us currently, but she wrote for us first 4 issues. Was from Lowell, and her father was actually in the fight game. He was a promoter. Roberto Duran used to come to her house, you know, Alexis Arguello. I mean, she knew all these people. They came in and out of her house. She had a very rough, tough upbringing. And so she brought a lot into her writing. She brought a lot of what was going on in Lowell. Of course, Jack Kerouac's from Lowell.
Yeah.
So,
so Michael, I would like to know what your pick for like a
I'm going to give you 2 picks.
Okay.
All right.
I can't wait. I got my pen out. I'm ready.
Number 1 is The Setup. 1949, starring Robert Ryan, directed by Robert Wise. For me, it's the greatest boxing movie ever made. Big influence on Martin Scorsese for Raging Bull. I happen to think that Raging Bull, although yes, the fight scenes are kind of, I don't know, surreal in a way. It goes off, but to be honest with you, if you know Jake LaMotta's career and you've seen the actual fights, they're pretty darn accurate to what happened in those fights. You know, there's a lot of dramatic liberty being taken, as in any boxing movie. You know, even as a fight fan, or if you're a boxer, you know, you have to understand dramatic license. My father going to see movies with my dad was like, you know, it was very similar to Eddie's dad, who was, you know, a boxing columnist, who would call out in the middle of watching a fight, that can't happen. There's no way that could happen. You know, my father was almost the same way. You know, it was like, no, that's not the way it goes. But I think the scenes in that, I think it was maybe Criterion when they did the original Laserdisc, they actually did a side by side showing his fights and the actual fight footage, and showed what was kind of going on, that they were very accurate.
Oh, Mike, I love these two picks. So can we go back to the setup?
My pick is my other pick. The setup, my other pick is Fat City. It's the movie Fat City, directed 1972, directed by John Huston, based on the brilliant novel by Leonard Gardner.
I have it.
I've not seen that.
Oh, Julie, it's talk about gritty.
Yeah, it's Stockton, California. It's filmed. It actually Leonard Gardner wrote the screenplay to the book, to the movie based on his book. And it is an amazing movie about Stockton, California, pretty depressed area. Brilliant opening, which is actually almost documentary footage about Stockton and what Stockton was like at that time. But Stacy Keach and Jeff Bridges, about no like big fights, heavyweight fights, you know, and no celebrity fighters or anything like that. It's all about fighters on the way up, one fighter on the young fighter on the way up, one fighter, older fighter on the way down. It's almost the equivalent of club fighters. The book is amazing. It won all kinds of awards. I know the movie won the Cannes Film Festival Award in 72.
Okay. Well, we're gonna start with Fascinating, then we're gonna go to the setup, because I want to tell people about why it's set. Or actually, no, we're gonna start with the setup, and then because the setup is 72 minutes in real time.
Right.
And I think that's amazing because it's a boxing. It goes through the beginning of a fight and through the fight. And I feel it's one that really shows where boxing is the main event, you know, where we're talking about Lowell and Stockton as these kind of depressed former mill towns or other kinds of towns, where the setup, and can you go through the quick synopsis of what it's about?
Yeah, so the setup is about a fighter played by Robert Ryan. It's actually based on a poem. It's based on a poem, and the poem, very long poem. And the poem is actually, the fighter is African-American. And of course, there's no way. Robert Wise wanted to cast a black actor. And there's no way that Hollywood, RKO, which was run by Howard Hughes at the time, was not going to permit that. Robert Ryan loved the poem and he kind of lobbied for it. He was at RKO. But anyways, it's about a kind of not a down and out fighter, but a fighter who had been a named fighter, never really got his real shot at any point, but he's now become a gateway fighter in a way, and he is going to fight a young fighter. And this young fighter is backed by a gambler, local gambler, and a local gangster. And Robert Ryan's character's manager has agreed for Robert Ryan to take a dive for this young fighter. There's all kinds of money going on, and this is at a small club. And
what's the town?
The town is it's
somewhere. It's something. It's not New York.
No. It's a fantasy almost. It's I can't think of it right.
I'll look for you.
If you look it up, you'll know. And clocks are also prominent throughout. The movie opens with a clock, so that you're always aware that it's of the time. So, because like you said, it is real time. It takes place. It takes place in the amount of time that, you know, it's real time that's going on. That's clocking off in the movie, which is one of the elements that makes it amazing.
Yeah.
But anyways, he's supposed to take a dive. They don't tell him to take a dive because they think he's so bad and he's so washed up that this young fighter is going to beat him anyways. And they say, why should we? The manager says to the trainer, who is also in on it, why should we share the money that we're going to get for the dive with him? You know, it's like, let's not split the money with him. He's going to lose anyways. Well, anyways, this guy's got a lot of pride. His wife comes along with him. And, you know, he keeps telling her they're at this rundown hotel that they're at across the street from where the fight is. And, you know, he's going through the spiel of like, you know I can take this guy. If I can get this guy, he's young, I'll get another big fight and it'll lead to a title shot possibly. And, you know, and she's realistic. She understands what's going on. He's battle weary. And she actually doesn't even want to go and watch him fight. And he goes to, and long story short, he goes in, he goes and fights this guy. It's a 3-round fight, I believe. And he looks like he's losing. The fight is going back and forth. It looks like he's losing. And then he starts to win. He's supposed to take a dive at a certain round. And when he doesn't, everybody's getting upset. Gangster in the crowd is getting upset. The manager of the other fighter who knows the guy is supposed to go down is getting upset. And then they reveal it to Robert Ryan. They say, look, you have to take a dive. You know, this is what's going on. You have to do this. If you don't, you're gonna get killed, or something terrible is gonna happen. So you've got to do this. And his pride takes over, and he decides not to, and he actually is able to win the fight. At the end of the fight, they catch up to him and they break his hand. They smash it, and he can never fight again. And he's left in the street, lying in the street in his arms of his wife. But in the end, she's like, we'll go on, we'll buy that diner, or you can try to like train a fighter, It's one of the great film noir movies. It's one of the great boxing movies. I think it's my favorite film noir movie too, besides being my favorite boxing movie.
How economic is it? Not only is it less than, a regular, usually an hour and a half is your movie, and this is less than that.
It's amazingly tight. The editing, you bring up the editing. Robert Wise is the director. Robert Wise was the editor for Citizen Kane. He was one of the greatest movie editors ever. And he directed this movie, and it is so beautifully edited. It is such a beautiful story. It's so wonderfully done. And it was written by a sports writer. It was actually written by a sports writer. The screenplay was written by a sports writer based on the poem.
And the screenplay, in terms of the writing, every line, Julie, sounds like something I want to put on my wall, because it's like, you're a fighter, you gotta fight. Or I'm looking at a couple, top spot, and I'm just one punch away. I want to make gifts of all of these because it's that sharp. It really understands, and obviously we're looking at it back now retrospectively, but she'll get back on. This has happened, but what the boxing cinema is doing, I think. And, we talked about, I liked how we brought up the tropes. We shouldn't always think of them as cliches. They're actually the meta narratives that we connect to.
Yeah. And I could see where some people might say that the setup has some cliches within it. But I don't think it does. And I think I've recommended it to a lot of people. I've recommended it to people who probably don't necessarily even like old movies. There are a lot of people out there who just don't want to watch a black and white movie.
I know.
But I don't think I've ever had anyone who said that that they didn't love the movie. So
In case Julie's gonna call me, but oh well, don't worry. I think she's here. Do we have a? Oh, my battery might die soon. Okay, well, it's just us, the last people standing. Thank you for bringing the setup up. Now, Fat City, let's end with that. In terms of what it means, are you aware of the Diaz brothers in MMA, Michael?
I am not, as I told you, I'm not an MMA fan.
No.
I'm a pure boxing guy. So
For those who are out there who and I'm both. I adore both, and I especially love the old boxing films, as you know. But the Nate and Nick Diaz are MMA fighters who've been around for a while. They've been in the game for over a decade, both of them, and they're Stockton proud.
they are Stockton. Okay.
They're Stockton, and 209 is the area code of Stockton, and they talk about they're also have had rough childhoods and have through it, and so it's interesting. They're both Hispanic origins, and so MMA has this Stockton kind of thread that goes through it. I even have a T-shirt that says Stockton 209. So that just to let you know, but I think it's really interesting how cities have these things, and I think it's because California is one of the places where BJJ started growing, and that's where he started doing his training there.
Well, but boxing in California, in LA and San Francisco, it's got great history there. I'm good friends with guy who just directed the documentary about the Olympic Auditorium and the history of the Olympic Auditorium and all the great fights that happened at the Olympic and all the things that happened at the Olympic. I mean, just not just boxing, it was roller derby, wrestling, punk rock. There's all kinds of things that happened there, but also in San Francisco at the Cow Palace.
Yeah.
In Dale City in San Francisco, all the great fights that were there. Eddie's father, covered a lot of those fights. And Stockton, is right there, that has a pretty rich history. We have a writer who was from Stockton, who was a light heavyweight fighter in Stockton. He's writing for us, and he's written a couple of things about things that happen in Stockton and in the gyms in Stockton and some of the things that have happened there.
And it's so interesting how, for me, I also see that these towns that have had, because I believe Stockton, unfortunately, is like one of the lowest rated or highest rates of unemployment and other kinds of things, because I believe it was a town that was built with an industry that left, just like I know it was a mill town, textile in Lowell, and how boxing has been a thread that's continued, these boxing gyms, clubs, and how you talk about people who grow up with this in their lives, and and I think that's something it's an American thing that we, I'm sure that the UK and other places, Latin America has their stories, but for me, in American cinema, it's definitely a wonderful way to talk about these cities.
Right. And I think talking earlier about why are boxing movies, why are the best movies about sports boxing movies? And I think it's because boxing is a transcendent sport, and that politically and as far as the arts go, I mean, there's a reason why the greatest writers wrote about boxing. James Baldwin, Jack London, Norman Mailer, I mean, you name it, they all wrote about boxing. And the great movies, whether it's Martin Scorsese or it's somebody like Robert Wise who did the setup, John Huston who did Fat City, they all want to do a boxing movie. There's something there that transcends all that. And then it gets into the whole political thing with when you've got Joe Louis versus Max Schmeling, Ali Frazier won. Even Holmes Cooney, which was one of the most, for me, it's the most memorable fight I ever watched, because at the time I was working construction, and I was a teenager, and I went to a bar with the guys I worked construction with, and everybody there was white, and everybody there was pulling for Jerry Cooney, and I was the only one pulling for Larry Holmes, and it got ugly, and but it was one of the most satisfying wins I ever watched, when Holmes, knocked him out. It was just, for me, it was one of the most satisfying boxing matches I had ever watched.
No.
So boxing transcends all that. I mean, there's no other sport that can really do that. I mean, there's been great baseball movies, and I think that says something too, but and there's great writing about baseball too. But man, boxing is just a magnet. And it still seems to be, because the book, like, in the Ringside Cinema book, I mean, I've all the way up to, the most recent movie, which I guess maybe is a debate of whether it's boxing or a boxing movie or not, but One Night in Miami, which I feel is about boxing, because they're in Miami. The four of them were in Miami to see Clay Liston. Yeah. And I think they did a pretty good job of that. My only criticism was, I thought the guy who played Malcolm X was a little weak. And I think Malcolm X was dynamic and strong, and he was highly influential. He was so strong. So that was my only criticism, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was excellent. But anyway, so boxing is still pulling that in, that kind of that idea.
No, and looking forward, I know that there's more boxing movies that are in pre-production, and I think that I love that. I feel like it's safe. Now, I love how you brought up boxing is dead, or but it's so interesting because that's been said so many times, and boxing for me, it always comes back.
It always does. After Pacquiao Mayweather, they were, when it was a disappointment, it was a horrible fight. Because the buildup was so great to it, and it didn't deliver. Unlike Ali Frazier won, which the buildup for that was amazing and huge, and then it did live up to everything and more. But Pacquiao Mayweather didn't, and after that, everybody said boxing's dead. Who gives a crap about boxing? We don't care about boxing. It's going to die. Let it die. And it didn't. It's never going to die.
No, it's not going to die. And I love that
when Jack Johnson became heavyweight champion, they said boxing should die. They wanted to outlaw boxing.
Exactly. No, so I understand. It's almost kind of a trope that people put it out there, and
that is it. Definitely, I agree. That is a trope. It's like this trope that it's like boxing is dead. And
but maybe boxing gets to reinvent itself every time, because or there's a rebirth, because you and I see it continuing. But I do think that there's a build up to another fight. Something will come along, and I think what I'm looking forward to is the Tyson Fury. Well, I guess it's either Unix, or if they're gonna.
It's either going to be Usyk, Usyk and Anthony Joshua have to fight their rematch, because that's going to happen. So I don't see anything about Anthony Joshua that tells me that he's going to be able to beat him.
I agree. I think that we were talking about heavyweights that kind of built up a little bit too much, and and I wish they had that Joshua fight with Tyson earlier. These are the kind of things, but
yeah,
I love this second act of Tyson Fury. So
he's amazing, and he is, he is British, but he is the kind of transcendent star that it's not quite Mike Tyson, not that kind of popularity, not that old kind of popularity. That's the thing about boxing. It's like, I don't know if boxing will ever get back to the point that it once was. But it's not going to die. It's not dying.
But I mean, I think that we also don't think like Tyson wasn't even the biggest, because if we really want to think it was when, Dempsey versus Tooney and the whole world was watching, or these other fights where boxing was the biggest scene. And, that was on radio or on obviously in print. And
sure, it was the big story in the newspapers. I mean, everybody grabbed a newspaper the next day. I mean, where our reading habits also completely changed. I mean, nobody reads newspapers the same way anymore. I was watching the Crawford Porter fight Saturday night. I'm a big fan of Terrence Crawford. I love him. I think he's right there with Canelo as the top fighters. But I'm watching it and I'm thinking, wow, this is a big fight. I mean, it's a pay-per-view fight, but it's a big fight. And they're showing celebrities in the audience, and I'm thinking to myself, God, I remember when, the celebrities they're showing are like some former fighters, some current fighters. But I remember there was a day when the biggest stars came to, and it wasn't just a heavyweight match. They would come to a Leonard fight or a Hagler fight, and Jack Nicholson, Warren Beatty,
No, it was
Sylvester Stallone when he was big, Arnold Schwarzenegger,
Taylor at the Ali, or would have been Cassius Clay fights, and
actually Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor were ringside at Clay, what's his name,
or
the British fight, and it was when he got knocked down, and actually he made, why can't I remember the fighter's name? I can't remember the British fighter's name. I should know this.
Oh, it'll come.
Sorry. Anyways, he horrific cut, and the blood splattered on Elizabeth Taylor's dress ringside.
Because that's incredible. And I'm sure she was wearing something that was like,
oh yeah, I don't think there's a shot. I've watched that fight, and I've actually posted clips from that fight on the Ringside Seat Twitter account, and I don't think I've ever seen a shot of her. I know she was in the audience, but I've never seen a shot of her and Richard Burton there.
Well, it says Henry Cooper.
Henry Cooper, yes, he fought Henry Cooper actually twice. That was the first time he fought Henry Cooper, and he knocked Cooper's left hook, which Ali was susceptible to the left hook. Joe Frazier also. He was susceptible to the left hook. He got knocked down by that beautiful left hook that Henry Cooper hit him with.
Yes.
And he was going pretty much out on his feet. If you've ever seen it, and it was right at the end of the round. Luckily for Ali, Ali could take an amazing punch. Oh, is that a shot of her at the fight?
There she is wearing, so that's what it says, according to this internet site. That
is so cool. That is so cool. I've never seen that shot of her. That she was, so that there's the press. You can see the press there. So she was close to the ring, but she was, from what I understand and read, and maybe this is just not a rumor. It's just a rumor, but she got hit with some of Henry Cooper's blood.
Oh my God, that's just, and probably rolled with it.
That is a great photo. I'd love to have that photo and put it in Ringside Seat.
And I know it looks like someone owns it, right?
Well, it's Alamy. Actually, Alamy and I've actually purchased rights to photos from them before. So they are like very, very much like, they're like Getty. They're like Getty Images. So, you have to purchase the rights to these photos, some of these photos.
Piece just about how they got there, like where they went to dinner, like who was the person who got them the tickets. That's me. That's a
great photo. That's a great photo.
Definitely put the link in and send it to you.
Oh, great. Thank you.
But no, I mean, I think we got back to a little bit too. I also think is really interesting is the golden age of cinema, we generally say is from like 1930 to 1945. And that was because like 7,000 plus movies were made because we didn't have TV. And also this is during the Depression.
And during the war, you know, and the war, you know, they were churning out movies left and right during the war.
Oh yeah. Some propaganda, but you know, that's.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if you've ever read the book Five Came Back, which was about the five directors, which is a fantastic book. Great documentary too.
I want to see the documentary.
Very good. It's very good. It's written by the author of the book.
Who was which director was that? Or it's written by an author.
It's written by the author who wrote Five Came Back. The documentary is. So yeah. It's very good. But the book is better because there's just so much more in the book.
You remember some of the directors? It's
who were the directors? It was it was John Huston. It was director of
Hawks, or I'm trying to think of. Or
I will look it up.
You can look that up, but that's amazing because that it talks about their influence, and a lot of, you know, and boxers also went to the war and came back. I mean, Joe Louis, we don't know how much he had to do in the war.
He didn't have. It was mostly him doing exhibitions for the fighters, and that's pretty much all he did. I am going to look up.
I'll let you do that. Max Schmeling, actually, we watched a documentary in class about Schmeling versus Lewis too, and what that fight meant, and how Schmeling, when he lost, Hitler sent him to, even though he was an older person who wouldn't normally be in the front lines, Hitler put him in, you know, a ship back to Europe and put him in the front lines because he lost. And, you know, and it's fascinating because he wasn't a Nazi, by the way.
He was not a Nazi. He certainly craved the fame. There was a documentary I watched actually recently about the fight between Lewis and Schmeling. It's a PBS documentary. It was actually American Experience. It's part of the American Experience series. And, you know, they discussed that and how he wasn't a Nazi, and how he beat, you know, of course he beat Lewis, you know, the first time he knocked Lewis out. He saw some faults in Lewis's strategy as a fighter and took advantage of that. And of course, Lewis annihilated him in their rematch. But it's a fascinating story, and it goes back again to boxing being transcendent. You know, that fight was a transcendent fight.
There's a transcendent fight, you know, with Roosevelt saying, you know, take these muscles for the US at the time to Joe Louis, and also knowing that Joe Louis would become the second African-American champion after a long time after Jack Johnson, who we've also discussed, and how he had to behave so well because of that.
He was given rules that he had, of things he had to do or could not do. Of course, one of them was never to smile after he won, and never, you know, all the things that he had to be the antithesis of Jack Johnson and the antithesis of what Muhammad Ali eventually became, because Muhammad Ali was very heavily influenced by Jack Johnson. And there was a lot of weight on Lewis's shoulders. Treatment of African Americans in this country at that time was horrendous. It was horrible. They couldn't even fight in the war when they wanted to. You know, so there was a lot that he had to deal with. Joe Lewis's story is a fascinating story. There's a couple of good biographies about him that are really, really interesting, and it's fascinating and interesting. Here are the five directors.
The five who came back:
William Wyler, Frank Capra, George Stevens, John Ford, and John Huston. For me, I took away when I read the book was George Stevens, who was director of A Place in the Sun and who actually directed before he went to war. And these guys saw a lot of heavy stuff. And George Stevens was there at the liberation of concentration camp. And it deeply affected him. And before he went to war, he and these guys filmed for the government. You know, they filmed documentary footage, and for Stevens, a lot of his stuff he had to film, and he did film. He stayed longer than anybody else for the Nuremberg trials, and a lot of the stuff that he used they used directly for the Nuremberg trials. But it deeply affected him, and he was a director primarily of screwball comedies before the war.
I think that's where because I'm a huge fan of.
And he stopped after that. When he came back, he was doing dark, dramatic films. I mean, he could not do those movies anymore. It deeply affected him. And his story is amazing, but the whole thing is fantastic, and it's fascinating. You know, anybody who's interested in history or anybody who's interested in film should really read Five Came Back.
I agree. Read that. We didn't even get through the whole arc of what Joe Lewis's life goes into. So please, people, read the biography, because when my students find out what condition he was and what he was doing when he died, they can't believe it. And
it's a pretty typical story, unfortunately, of fighters. We ran an article about this, not about fighters going back to Joe Lewis's time, but more contemporary fighters and what they've been going through. It's pretty sad, and actually a really fantastic, in the new issue of Ringside Seat. I don't know if you've read it yet, but our editor, Bill Detloff, wrote a fantastic editorial about Donald Curry. And I don't know if you've seen what's going on with Donald Curry, who was one of the great champions and one of the great fighters in the 80s. He was supposed to be like the next Sugar Ray Leonard. And his son came on Twitter on Curry's account and talked about what Curry is going through. He's obviously suffering through CTE.
Oh, God.
Depression, violent behavior, physical problems. And Bill Detloff, who's our editor, wrote a fantastic piece about this, just about not only about Curry, but about just Americans and what they face in trying to get healthcare and proper healthcare, both mental and physical healthcare. People, I would hope. I think we will probably put it on our website at some point, after the issue's been out for a while, because I think it's something I would like everybody to read. But anyways, it's a great, you have to. It's one of the things about boxing. It's like, as Bill said in his editorial, we want to turn away. We want to remember. All we want to do is remember nostalgically these fighters and how they were when they were young. And we want to turn away and not look at, what's going on now with them, but they need our help. They need care. And boxing ain't going to do it. Boxing isn't going to be there, as a sport, I mean, that's not going to happen. And as he wrote in his piece, it's like, everybody deserves to have proper and good healthcare.
Yeah. Especially when your body and your spirit and everything is being put into this sport for these promotions. I'm not as aware. I know boxing now has the Muhammad Ali Act, but MMA does not have those kind of protections. And the UFC, unlike the NBA, NFL, which pays half of their revenue.
Yeah.
The
NFL does this kind of stuff now. They're doing it. They weren't before, but now they're much better. And you know, there's still some problems there, but boxing, there's no whole sanctioning body in boxing. Boxing is split up among these crooked alphabet sanctioning bodies, you know, and boxing's always been that way. I mean, boxing was run by gangsters, you know, I mean,
No, FBI had to come in at least once and clear it out in the 40s. And no, it's interesting because we had it was Holyfield they brought in to fight an MMA fighter in one of these Triller.
Oh yeah, that was very sad. That was horrible. It was I was not going to pay any money for that. I was not going to give those people any of my money for you know, this exploitation is what it was. You know, you could say Vander Holyfield did it on his own. He made his own, it was his own free will, but you know,
I think there's compromise, and the fact that California would not sanction it, and so then they went to Florida to get this fight. That says everything.
Look, you could do that at Muhammad Ali's last fight against Trevor Berbick. You know, he fought Larry Holmes. It was the beginning. Everyone saw it even before the Holmes fight that like he was having problems, and the fact that he even got that fight, and then what happened in that fight, and then afterwards the fact that he wanted to fight one more time, and they had to go to Bermuda. Was it Bermuda or Jamaica? I think it was Bermuda. He had to go to Bermuda to be able to get a boxing license, and you know, it was you know, so this type of thing has been going on for so long. And I mean, there's even, you know, other fighters who were not named fighters who are carrying on their careers far too long. You know, it's the noir of sports. I always say it. You know, boxing is the noir of sports.
I agree, and I love that you're bringing this back to noir because I know, you know, we've Nightmare Alley. I'm very excited to have a neo noir that's going to be out, and the buzz is going just like you build up a fight. So we'll see. By the way, I wanted to bring Nightmare Alley, the original 1949 Tyrone Power up because he also, before he went to the war, and before that, he would do the kind of good leading man roles. But when he came back, I know this from, I'm quoting your friend Mueller right now, that they came back and he wanted something edgier. He wanted to do something artier. And so I feel like this movie, I didn't know of it, honestly, until it was
based on a brilliant book, which I'm currently reading. The novel is fantastic. I'm reading it for the first time right now.
How similar is it to the first film?
It is similar, different ending, much different ending.
Okay. Guillermo del Toro, who's directing.
Very faithful. Eddie saw the movie. He told me he loved it, and you know,
I'm very excited. I thought it was coming out in the beginning of December, but it looks like they've moved it back.
Yeah, so it's coming out mid-December, I believe. And you know what's funny is I'm working on the new issue of Ringside's Noir City, and one of our main articles is Carnival Noir, and I'm actually doing the layout. I'm designing the piece right now, and I do part of my work as a photo editor too, is just search and gather all the photos. But this article was just talking about how Tyrone Power desperately wanted to have the lead in this movie, and it was very dark. Of course, it's a very dark story, and it was very unlike anything else he had done. And the studio decided to let him do it, and the movie was a box office failure, and he was never allowed to have another role like that. I guess the difference would be, you know, Witness for the Prosecution, which was much later in his career. That's closer. But during the time of him as a matinee idol, he never made another movie like that.
Well, I'm telling people, everyone, go, especially before you watch the new one, go and watch this 1949. It is fantastic. I was riveted, and I was like, how come I haven't heard of it? But I love this idea of the carnival noir. So
Right.
I'm assuming there's more in this genre.
There is. And when you'll see in the issue, it's a
can't
long article, and I will send you a link to all you need to do. Actually, if you love film noir and you like Noir City, I mean Noir Alley, and who doesn't? I mean, everybody likes Noir Alley. I mean,
I,
Del Toro is a huge fan of Noir Alley. In fact, he arranged for Eddie to have a private screening of Nightmare Alley.
we're all fans. I love it that Delta. That is amazing.
And so I will actually send you a link. And all you need to do is, if you donate $20 or more to the Film Noir Foundation, and we restore movies.
Yes.
We've restored countless film noir movies. And that $20 gets you a permanent subscription to Noir City digital magazine, but we are now doing a print edition. We got two. This is our second print edition coming. This will be our third print edition. So yeah, there's great stuff. You'll love this Carnival Noir article. And Eddie is going to be actually showing Nightmare Alley coming up on Noir Alley.
Oh,
the original.
The original. I cannot wait. I love it. I also love his fashion. I'm always wondering, like, what kind of zoot suit, purple, but it sounds, I'm so glad that you guys have joined forces, because it sounds like you guys both have this creative.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I've known Eddie, God, almost 15 years, I guess we've been friends. So, and we bonded. Funny thing is, we bonded over three things: movies, boxing, and comics. So, three of our loves.
And I love it because this is all comes into play in Ringside Cinema, as well as all of these amazing ventures that I am so happy that they are existing, because I want long form writing. I want also the rich art direction that you do with these too. It's it's lovely to look at these pictures, and so thank
you. And yeah, so if anybody, if your students or anybody is interested in reading, I think, and we've been told, really quality, great writing. Ringsideseatmag.com. I mean, everything is there. You can order our books, you can order our magazines. There's free articles if you want to test us out. You can go. We've got a whole page of like free articles to read about fight reports. We've got a great piece about Fat City that was written about the book and the movie by Don Stradley. So I mean, there's a lot of great stuff there.
Thank you so much, Michael. I could go on even more, but I'm going to stop myself and we'll continue it. So one thing I wanted to do is ask what your people's favorite boxing scene in a movie is. And I'm going to name this one because I think I would call it a noir, but Requiem for a Heavyweight.
Oh yeah, that's noir. Oh yeah.
That noir, and the beginning scene, which Cassius Clay is in.
Mm-hmm.
And is it also what I think it's so interesting how experimental and innovative it was, because I think they show the perspective of the boxer, and who's played by Anthony Quinn.
Right.
Yes. And this is another, like, the boxer's like at the end of his career, and I'm not going to say anything else, but that is another
great story written by Rod Serling, who created the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
It was originally a TV play.
Really?
With Jack Palance.
Huh.
Jack Palance starred in it. We actually wrote an article. My brother wrote an article for Ringside Seat talking about the play, the original teleplay, and the movie. But it's a great story. The movie is my favorite. I love the movie. And yeah, that opening scene with Cassius Clay is great. There's a lot of great ex-boxers who make cameos in it. And who actually have roles in it too. It's beautifully done. Anthony Quinn is fantastic, and it actually has a pretty cool meta moment in it. Not talking about. Let's not confuse with Facebook, okay? Meta. I mean, when I mean meta, I mean metafiction. I mean metafiction, which is an actual thing, and it's when. So Anthony Quinn's character, who is Mountain Marco, is out he's looking at this large poster in the alley, and it's this poster of him versus Cassius Clay, and it says, you know, him versus Cassius Clay. Well, what's great is that they're at the Fifth Street Gym, which was Ali's gym in Miami Beach, which I actually got to visit because I grew up in Miami. When Ali trained, there's a bunch of photographs of him in training, and that poster is up in his gym, which is great thing, like movie becoming reality, you know. I really love that.
That's great. Do you have a favorite scene that you also like to add?
You know, there's a moment in Raging Bull that I just adore. And it is when LaMotta and his brother and his trainer are walking out, and it's supposed to be, I guess it's the arena in Detroit. I forgot which arena in Detroit. And actually, I think from my friend told me, it was actually filmed at the Olympic Auditorium, and it's supposed to be Detroit, but it was filmed at the Olympic Auditorium by Scorsese. But it's that scene where he's walking out for his title fight against Marcel Cerdan. And it's just the camera. Scorsese has him going through the actual hallway, and he's walking out into the ring, and it's like silent, and it just goes into the crowd, and the crowd, just the fade in of the crowd screaming for this big fight. You know, it's like LaMotta's finally getting his title shot that he actually took a dive for, you know, that he never wanted to do, but he takes a dive for. But that the music, the great crescendo of music and the crescendo of the crowd, and he's walking through, and it's just a tracking shot of him behind him, walking and following him out into the ring. And it's very reminiscent of actually a similar tracking shot, which was not as elaborate in the setup. As you know, you go into the arena, and it's obvious that Scorsese was influenced by that. And I think he said it because Scorsese does the voiceover commentary on the setup for the DVD. So, but anyways, that's like a scene that it's like, there's no dialogue in it, but it's like, it just, for me, it kind of captured kind of boxing and that moment, that excitement and the drama of a big title fight.
You know, I love it. We could probably have a conversation just about the walkout scenes because they bring in
sure
so much. I mean, I'm thinking about Rocky IV, or where,
well, even Rocky, the original Rocky. I have a new appreciation of the movie because I wasn't a big fan of the movie. I had seen it when I was younger, when I was a teenager, and I loved it because I was a big boxing fan as a young man, and I saw it with my dad, who was a boxer, and then I hadn't seen it for many years, and I had seen more other things like Fat City. I saw Raging Bull, and I saw Requiem for a Heavyweight, Body and Soul. You know, it's like all these movies that filled me up, and it's like God, now these are great movies.
Yeah.
And The Harder They Fall also. And Rocky kind of faded from my memory, and what I remember more were the sequels, which were, it's like, you know, I guess they're okay for entertainment purposes, but you know,
going on.
Yeah. And so my brother wrote this piece about, and my brother is the managing editor of North City Magazine, and he wanted to write a piece about the original Rocky, and he loved it, and he wanted to write this appreciation of it. And it's the cover story of the new issue of Ringside Seat. And so I said, well, I got to watch it. I'm going to have to watch it. I haven't watched it probably in 20 years. So I need to watch it because I'm going to do the design for this. I got to find photos and stuff. I had a new appreciation for that movie, a real new, deep appreciation for the first Rocky movie and how really good it is as a movie. And it has a great walkout scene. It has it has this great moment where Rocky Balboa is, before the fight, that night before, he's in the ring, and he's staring at this life-size banner of himself, And so it's a great moment for Stallone. I don't think it's the greatest actor in the world, but it's a great moment for him because you could really capture in his eyes. It's like, how did this happen? How did I get here?
No,
You know?
because we actually have my students, because of the brevity of the course, they watch Rocky and they watch The Fighter, none, those are old movies for them.
Of course, right.
But because you can talk about so many things, but yeah, the Night of the Soul, because we've done some research on it, that originally wasn't going to be filmed, that scene. But I guess Stallone said, no, this is needed. And it really does, because that is why Going the Distance gives you that payoff where most of my students don't know that Rocky loses in the first movie. And
right. And that's what's great about it, because it's like, you know, it is 1,000,000 to 1 shot for this guy that he would go the distance. I mean, because he starts out as a club fighter. He starts as like the most crude club fighter there could be. But it's a very gritty film. It's a really gritty film. And my brother wrote about how the whole thing came about, you know, how Stallone had nothing and how Stallone, you know, was pretty much broke. And when United Artists decided that they were going to go ahead, yeah, we'll buy the script, but you're not going to star in it. And they were going to give him a lot of money for the script. And he decided to take, like, I guess, scale for it so that he would be in it. And of course, the budget got reduced. I mean, it's a very small budget. It's a low budget film. But it was really good. I had to change my mind. I've said to so many people, it's like, oh, Rocky, you know, like, you know, come on, don't watch Rocky. You know, the setup, watch the setup, watch Raging Bull, watch Fat City, watch Body and Soul. But you know, I feel much differently now.
I agree, and I think that there is a reason as to kind of, it is the first boxing movie to win Best Picture, I guess, if we want to call it in that.
I think so. I'm not sure, but you know, it may have.
Others that would follow, like $1 Million Baby, and I did Raging Bull. I think
Raging Bull did not. Raging Bull won for Best Editing, and De Niro won for Best Actor.
Yeah. But there is something about that film, and you know, I think that the sequels, then it becomes about Rocky versus communism and Rocky, you know, but that first one, you're right. It's this guy fighting himself or fighting through the world. And
and my brother in his piece wrote, and it's like, this is for your students to, you know, because I think this was a really interesting angle, because when he first proposed it to me, and he's written before, he wrote a really great article about, I told you about the comparison between the teleplay of Requiem for a Heavyweight and the movie. And then he wrote a really great piece about Rocky Graziano, about the life of Rocky Graziano, which started out as, I'm going to write about somebody up there likes me. But in the end, it's like, no, you know what? Graziano's life is so interesting. I'm going to write about Graziano. So, but his angle was, Rocky is the movie that broke this hatred, in a way, if you want to call it that, Hollywood, not hatred, but it became the first time Hollywood embraced boxing, you know, because every great boxing movie had always been about how crooked boxing is, the crooked people involved with it, you know, how it breaks fighters and leaves fighters broken, you know, at the end of all of the great fight, all of them, you know, Requiem for a Heavyweight, Body and Soul, the setup, the harder they fall. I mean, it's all about the crookedness of boxing. It's like why I call boxing the noir of sports. But Rocky is different. Rocky changed everything, and you know, it became the story that everybody loves. And the thing about with Ringside Seat and being involved with the writers who are writing it, and who know the fighters and are talk to the fighters and who have been writing about fighters, people like Nigel Collins and Bill Detloff, who have been interviewing fighters they all love Rocky, the first Rocky. I mean, they may like the sequels too, but they all love the first Rocky. There's that appreciation and love of that movie.
Yeah. Oh, I wholeheartedly. And you know, we could talk about, you brought up Somebody Up There Likes Me, who I believe is done by the same director as West Side Story.
This
And-
Robert Wise, who directed the setup.
The setup, and that is Paul Newman in this.
Yeah, Paul Newman. Yeah,
It's
he was
that.
great. He was great. Do you know that James Dean was supposed to play that? Was supposed to star in that before he died?
Wow, I don't know. That's an interesting. I can't. Now I'm gonna have to think about that.
Yeah, not most people are like, oh no, that would not work.
I just have, you know, I see Paul Newman, and I, you know, where James Dean would have been. The guy is like, he's energy. He's you know, he makes his world. So.
Yeah, I can't picture, but you know, maybe he could have pulled it off. I don't know, but
I love just even contemplating. And we have there's so many more movies that we haven't gotten into, but I realize you know, we're now at 9:08. And I'm gonna have to stop myself because I will go into more. But
yeah,
like,
I will not stop.
I know.
That's the problem. I could keep going about movies and boxing and.
This is to be continued. I got Golden Boy finally in the mail because I couldn't find it streaming, and so
I'm glad.
That film. It's a young William Harden.
William Holden, and you know that was written. That play was it was originally a play, and it was written for John Garfield. And you know, he was not enough of a star at that time for him to be in it. John Garfield eventually played that role on the stage.
Hey.
You know, my parents actually got to see him on Broadway and perform it. But yeah, it's a very good movie. It's the great story of, you know,
Golden Boy,
the guy who's the boxer and his parents don't want him to be, you know, he's supposed to be a violinist, you know, he's supposed to be an artist.
I think that's another trope or narrative that is so interesting. And Barbara Stanwyck, who is one of my favorite screwball comedy.
The greatest film actress in history. She's the greatest noir actress. There's no doubt about that, you know. And I think there's an argument to be said that maybe she's the greatest actress. I mean, I know Betty Davis too, but
Yeah,
Stanwyck, she's the best.
Barbara. Yes. Well, I want to talk to you all about Stanwyck and my love for her, but. Again, thank you so much. You know, please, Ringside Seat, everyone go check it out. I'm going to put all the information in the YouTube when this, you know, this is streaming now, but I'll load it up tomorrow with all that information. But thank you so much, Michael. Can't wait.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Nancy. It was great. I love talking to you. So it's like, it's a lot of fun.
Likewise. And I hope you have a wonderful holiday. Thanksgiving.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you. And take